Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm your host, Jay Acharya, CEO of Aspire Consulting and Training Limited. And this is the Becoming the Leader in You podcast. In every episode, I'm talking to guests about their leadership stories, both personal and professional, stories of their inspirations, their successes, and their challenges and how they've overcome them. Before we go any further, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. As well as being on YouTube, you can also listen to us on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, and all the other podcast stations. My guest today has over 20 years in the performing arts. Charlie started out in education before being lured away by the bright light of stand-up comedy, theatre, and broadcasting. Clearly deciding that one audience at a time wasn't quite enough, he returned to education in 2016, and this time as a senior leader behaviour specialist and drama teacher, bringing with him a unique ability to handle both a tough crowd and a tough classroom. Now working as a presentation and life skills coach, Charlie is passionate about leadership, motivation, and helping other people realize their potential so they can also perform at their best, whether that's on stage, in the boardroom, or just getting through on a Monday morning. Please welcome Charlie-Ross MacKenzie of Present with Presence. Charlie, it's great to have you with us today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, Jay. It's very exciting to be a part of a brand new podcast.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. And, it's always nice to have different types of guests. And it's nice to have different people. Tell me briefly, Charlie, if you don't mind, a bit about you. Just summarize a bit about you and what you do at the moment with Present with Presence.
Well, with this sort of really broad background I have in terms of the performing arts, in terms of broadcasting, I worked with the BBC for a long time, presenting and guest hosting on various shows for BBC Scotland and for 5 Live, as well as stand-up comedy and as well as acting and teaching as well. So I've worked as a lecturer in the City of Glasgow College in Glasgow, obviously, and then moved to London. And I was a teacher when I decided about 2010, 11, when the crash happened. In terms of the performing arts, they took a big hit in terms of especially things like corporate work and the kind of sort of paid work you could access started to drop dramatically. Getting a comedian in for a corporate event was seen as a bit of a luxury then. So that's the first thing to go. And I kind of thought, well, I've got to get ahead of the game here. I can see that this is going to become more and more challenging. And I went back into teaching. So I went back into teaching just initially back in as a basic classroom teacher, and then sort of moved up the ranks. I decided, well, if I'm going to do this, I may as well do it properly. And I went into middle leadership and then senior leadership, and I completed my career as an assistant head teacher in a school in St Albans called Verulam School, which is a fantastic school that I still go back and do occasional bits of supply work for them and cover teacher stuff, which is great fun. And decided that what I wanted to do for a long time was a coach on presentation skills. I feel quite passionate about this. This is the one area that I think you constantly see people really struggle with. Even people at the lower end and also people at the higher end, people who are skillful speakers. There's always an opportunity to refine it, and it's certainly a big part of leadership. Getting your message across, selling a message. Selling that authenticity is vital in leadership, and you've got to have the communication skills to sell that. And I found that as well, and I found the perception when I went from being a middle leader to a senior leader, my style of presentation had to change. I realized that people view you differently when you're now kind of their boss, you're in a senior position. So the kind of fluffy, nice guy I was as middle leader, and I used to do occasional talks and training to whole staff, that kind of perception changes and shifts. So the way that you present, the way that you talk to people has to change. And that's a vital part of the work that I do now. So I do a number of different things. I work with in the corporate sector with sales teams, for example. I work with some sales teams that trying to get a bit of authenticity into what they do. That word will come up quite a lot in the podcast. And also working, going back into schools and working with sixth form students. I really do believe that in an age of AI that these days, in terms of recruitment, in terms of applying to university courses and colleges, everyone's going to have a fantastic CV. Everyone's going to have a brilliant statement. But this is the one thing that AI can't reproduce. So my sort of my main focus is to do a lot of work in the corporate sector to earn enough so I can go into schools and do it for free.
The podcast is obviously called Becoming the Leader in You. And as you said, you've had different opportunities in different roles. My first question actually is about what that means to you. What does becoming the leader mean to you on a personal level?
When you sent that out to me, I thought that's a really good question, and I've been asked that question in interviews in various different forms. And it's one of the first and I think biggest challenges you have when you go into leadership is trying to figure out what is in you that makes you a leader? What qualities do you have that makes you a leader? And why should people listen to you? Why should people care about what you've got to say and follow you? And that's the key, isn't it?
Yeah.
For me, it was trying to be honest and reflective, to constantly be looking at myself from the point of view of the people I'm leading, and sort of saying, how do you think you've come across there? What message were you getting across there?
Yeah.
And constantly reflecting on that and looking back on it. And also understanding, I understood very quickly the areas I was less effective in, and by doing that, I was able to reflect on it and understand what it was that I couldn't do.
What were the less effective areas that you just mentioned?
Well, one of the things I always found challenging was having difficult conversations or challenging conversations. So where you're having a conversation with a member of staff and it's a disciplinary matter or something where they've messed up, or telling them there's been a complaint, as in schools you get complaints all the time. Can I point out that 95% of them are absolute nonsense?
Yeah.
But that was the area that I found challenging. I found my default position is to be friendly and empathetic and understanding, but sometimes in these challenging conversations you've got to be a bit more cold, distant, reserved, especially if you have to go through an investigation process. The whole thing where your temptation is to say, don't worry, it'll all be okay. Well, I can't guarantee in a leadership position that it's going to be okay. We have to go through the appropriate processes. So it's about, in those situations, dealing with that to me was about full preparation for a meeting and making sure that you've almost scripted what you're going to say. And it's like, do not come off that script, because if you do start becoming a bit more empathetic and a bit more, that can come back in you. Because then as a leader, someone can say, well, I've now been disciplined and he told me it was going to be fine. He said there was no problem. And that is a problem.
So, I have a question regarding how you work with corporate. Do you find at the moment that a lot more leaders are having challenging times trying to have those challenging conversations and those having to tell someone about their productivity, about their efficiencies? How are you finding that at the moment?
I mean, from that point of view, I think that it's dealing with, because obviously when you speak to someone, they're going to be on the defensive, they're going to be on the back foot. And the advice I tend to give is just do exactly that. Treat it like, make it as formal as you possibly can and make it clear from the outset. But there are also ways of dealing with it that I think sometimes leadership gets spectacularly wrong. And I think it's about ensuring that the person you're dealing with in terms of that kind of issue is they're clear about what they're talking about when they walk in the room. So you're giving as much information before the meeting as you can. I've had situations where leaders have said to me many, many years ago, someone said to me, believe it or not, on a Friday night at 4:00, oh, I need to speak to you at 8:30 on Monday morning about something. And I'm sorry, that's a power play. That's just someone trying to mess with you and trying to show I'm in charge and have you worried the whole weekend. It's like, well, can I not have a conversation now? No, it needs to be Monday morning. No, it doesn't need to be Monday morning, and fine well, and fine well what you're doing here. Exactly. And I've seen that kind of thing happen several times with leadership, and that's just getting it wrong. If you've got to have a difficult conversation, you give as much information as you can before, so people have a chance to prepare for that conversation. They've got the chance to make their case, because giving them information, the complaint in itself isn't going away. That's still there. The situation still exists, but everyone has the right to it's not a police interrogation. You have the right to have information and be able to defend yourself.
And I like the fact that you use the terminology power play, and the fact that it's been done on a Friday evening, prepped and ready for a Monday morning. And you do see that a lot in current leadership environments. And I know that when I've worked with certain clients and they've used that tactic it's kind of like, wow, this is why you've got a toxic culture within your organization if
Yeah.
you're going to use those methods. My second question to you is all about who you are or who shaped you, because Charlie, you're a teacher, or you were a teacher or a supply teacher. So as a teacher, I know that I used to look up to so many of my teachers, and in the 70s we had this time frame when you knew who your teachers were and you were able to spend time with the teachers, and they became your inspirations.
Yeah.
Nowadays, when I talk to my clients and to the people within certain training programs, or when I'm having conversations, I ask the question, who were your inspirations? People don't know who their teachers were, or their teachers weren't their inspiration. It
That's
was someone on
interesting.
YouTube or on an influencer on Instagram or TikTok. So as inspirations go, who would be the person, or what moment in your life was the thing that shaped you to be who you are today, that leader that you are today?
There's two I've got. One is real and one's fictional.
Okay.
And one is a head teacher I worked with in a school in Enfield many, many years ago. And I'm quite happy to name him because he's a legend. His name is Giles Bird.
Okay.
And he was head of Kingsmead School in Enfield. And Giles was a fabulous leader.
Yeah.
He was able to balance. He was also a drama teacher, bizarrely, which was, I suppose, that was the connection we had.
Yeah.
But he was able to balance all the aspects of leadership in just the right way. So you knew when you were getting a telling off, and you knew when you were getting praised, and he praised you. He was someone who was able to do both, because oftentimes with leadership, and I think this is the case in all sectors, both corporate and education, whatever, that people often say, I only know I'm doing well when no one's talking to me.
Right.
People only talk to me when there's something gone wrong.
Yeah.
Now, Giles was someone who would come to your classroom to say, I've just had someone say that lesson was fantastic, or I've just heard a parent saying they really enjoyed the show, or they really enjoyed the extracurricular stuff you're doing. So he had all that in place. But what he also did was he understood what it meant to be a leader in a school. He understood that it goes from, the top to him and his deputy head, all the way down to the year sevens in the school. And what he did was something very smart. So what Giles did was he taught 2 lessons a week, and he would be able to name every single child. Now, as a teacher, I wasn't able to do that sometimes with the classes I was teaching.
But he's visible
it takes
as
a long time. But his visibility was great. Staff would see him do that. And I remember thinking, that's the kind of leader. If I decide this is what I want to do, that's the kind of leader I want to be. I want to be like that. And because essentially in schools, you could say that the students are your clients. They're the customers. They're the people you've got to work with and convince. And knowing your students is so important, and it's as important as knowing the staff.
Right. But what about your second inspiration, your fictional inspiration?
The fictional one is President Jed Bartlett from The West Wing, the TV show The West Wing. I don't know if you've ever watched it. The sublime Martin Sheen played the president in that series that ran for 6-7 years. And the president in that, obviously he's very much a fictional president, because he's the kind of guy everyone would think, that's who you want running your country. This is the guy you need. What Jed Bartlett's main quality that I loved and I thought was really inspirational was, even though he was a very smart person, he surrounded himself with people that were as smart and sometimes smarter than he was. And he would take on board all the opinions. And then as a leader, you have to ultimately make the final decision. But he surrounded himself by smart people and listened to them. He surrounded himself with people who were, and I'm sure you know who I'm alluding to here, people who would say no to you, people who would disagree with you. And I think the weakest leaders are the ones that surround themselves by sycophants, that surround themselves by people who are not willing to disagree with what you've said or what you're putting across. People who will say, I don't think that's the right thing we should do. I'll go along with it because I'm a team player, but ultimately I disagree with that.
I think leadership and politics, they go really well hand in hand when we have these discussions about what does make a good leader, what makes a good politician. And I think when we look at, I don't like getting into politics, but when we look at politics right now, and you look around the world, we don't have any genuinely good stand-up leaders. there's always something about them that makes you question whether they
Yeah.
should be where they are. How does what Giles has taught you or Jay's taught you how does it spill into the way that you work with your clients today?
When I'm working with clients, it's trying to sort of emphasize that these positive qualities that these leaders have had, and that you can use that as a really vital and keen tool to get the best out of people you're working with. If you are leading a team, then that team's got to be going with you. They've got to be moving in the right direction. And these are little tricks that Giles and that Jed Bartlett used to get the team moving with them, to get them moving in the right direction. You want to work with them. You might not always agree with them. You might be disappointed in them, but you fundamentally want to be on board. And there's a phrase that's often used. Get on the bus, right?
Yeah.
And if there's people that are not pulling the right direction, then get them off the bus.
You do have people out there who you don't have to like the person that you're working for, as long as they've got the correct principles and they're doing the right thing. And I think that's those are some of the things that we do see with the people that we work with. That when you've got that assertive leader, that person that knows the direction that they want to go in, other people might find it difficult because they've not worked in that environment before. And my assumption is that's where you come in and support and do that sort of work with them to get them to get on board that bus.
Yes, exactly. How to create an authentic environment, an environment where people feel engaged, where people feel as if they've got the buy-in that you need, and you've got to convince them of that. That's your job as a leader, to make sure you've got them on board.
So my next question is about belief, because when we talk about journeys, a leader has got their mindset that this is what I want to achieve. This is how I want to achieve it. But in order to achieve it, I need all of you to help make that happen. What's a belief that you hold very dear to you that other people would disagree with?
This was a tricky one, and I thought a long time about this. And I think I firmly believe, and I know a lot of people will be shouting at the screen when I say this, I think a leader should not be afraid to look vulnerable at times. You shouldn't be afraid to show your vulnerable side, to show your sort of soft underbelly, if you like, and be it that kind of availability. But it's how you play that very carefully. And I think the people who follow you will find so much more respect for you if you just if you try to say, I'm struggling with this, or I have a problem with that. I think that this did upset me. This was something that I was quite disappointed by. Then I think that you get a lot of respect from that. Obviously, you don't want to be a leader who no one respects, a fawning, moaning Minnie who is going around all the time. So I'm so sorry, and I wish I was better, and I should have done this. Nobody wants that, and no one should be, and no one like that should be in a position of leadership either. But I think just an ability to show your vulnerable side, I think that's something that a lot of people would have a problem with, but I have no problem with. And I think
I think there's a word you used earlier on today, and you said it's going to be used a lot. It's authenticity. That makes you an authentic person, because we all have emotions. It's how we deal with those emotions. And if you're a cold-blooded, emotionless person, then the question is going to be, how many people are going to support you when you're struggling? And so that also leads me into the next part of the question, into another question, which is about pressures. We know that working as individuals, having our own businesses, having to look for the client work or the possibilities, and to try and find our clients out there, it can be a challenge for a small organization, a small business, a one-man band. So when the pressure is the highest for you, who do you become, Charlie, as an individual, as a leader?
Wow, I become focused. You realize when the pressure's really on, that's when you realize that there's no margin for error here. You can't take time off. You've got to be really, as you say, we had this conversation earlier when you're working 7 days a week sometimes. What's a weekend? You don't understand what a weekend is, because the days just fold into each other and you're constantly working on something. So I think I become that very tunnel visioned, very focused person. When you've got work on, when things are coming in, you're working on that day-to-day basis, you've got that there. It's nice, the money's coming in, it's okay. But when you realize that things are getting a little bit tight pressure wise, you've maybe struggling to get more clients in, or maybe you've got too much, maybe you've taken on too much and you're
Yeah.
having to try and balance all of that. That's when you have to become laser focused and you have to become sharper
Of course.
and really be on it. Because I do have a tendency to procrastinate. I do have a tendency to be a little bit, I'll take the 15 minutes off when, I've deserved a 15-minute, I've deserved a chocolate biscuit and a cup of coffee, or, I've deserved that, drink in the bar after a good meeting or whatever. But then, when you look at things in the cold light of day, you have to become much more focused, and that's the kind of person that I am. Because, like you are working for myself now, I'm leading myself. So you're having to sort of have these conversations with yourself and having challenging conversations with yourself. Sometimes I even have to do it out loud because that's the way madness goes. So that's kind of when the pressure's on, that's kind of who I become.
With presence, what other aspects of presentation skills do you provide to your clients?
Right. Well, I can work on a model, and one of the things I'm asked to do recently, I've been asked to do with a sales team, was to provide, I'm coming back to that word again, the authentic you, to develop authenticity. Because the concern with the team leader that I spoke to was that he felt when his team were presenting that they weren't bringing an authentic sort of side to themselves. They were playing a part, they were playing a role. They weren't revealing, as I said, that kind of who they were and letting their personality just flow. And there are a few things that I build on. It's passion and authenticity. You've got to bring passion, you've got to bring authenticity. And also, if you're selling something, you've got to be, convince the audience, why should I care? Why should I care about this product? And that's vital. It's really important, and you've got to get that buy-in. I think it's about that, not only just clarity, but it's about trust and engendering that trust. And if people believe you're an authentic person, they will trust you, because there's an old phrase in sales: people buy from people. There's a few times in my life where I've walked out of a car showroom. There's nothing wrong with the car I wanted to buy. I just wasn't impressed with the person who was trying to sell it to me.
I've got another question, and this sort of goes in. I mean, it's part of education, in fact. Where we sit at the moment with education in the UK, and still sticking on the leadership side of things, do you feel, and I'm really putting you on the spot here, do you think that we've got the right people in place, the right leaders in place in government at the moment, to understand what type of education we need today, tomorrow, and for the future?
I think from government point of view, I think they have the best of intentions. And I think that the changes they made to Ofsted have been positive. The changes they've made to scrutiny and how the schools are
but there was a reason behind that, wasn't it? There was a reason behind that. If that hadn't happened, then it wouldn't have changed.
No, they were getting it all wrong. I do, however, think that there was an opportunity that we missed after COVID. I think there was an opportunity, we let it sail by. There was a chance to really shake up education there, because education was shaken up for the first time in 200 years. No one had ever taught the way students were being taught over that period. That had never happened. And having people at home being taught, changed the face of how we do things and how we, engage with learners. It's based on Victorian values. It's based on systems that are really outdated now.
Do you think we're doing enough in state schools? It's easy to talk about the private schools and the grammar schools, etc., but state schools, do you think we're doing enough at the moment to create our leaders for tomorrow through those state schools?
To be fair, yes, there's an awful lot happens in schools now, which the opportunities for promotion, the opportunities for leadership are there in a much more abundance than they were when I started teaching in the 90s.
I'm talking about children here.
Oh, sorry. It's a struggle. I mean, I think the priority is to get the kids through their courses, to get them through the syllabus, to get them to their GCSEs and get them through their A-levels and get them moving on from that.
Sure.
But real strides and advances have been made in areas like PSHE. And there are things like extended professional qualifications, which has public speaking skills in it, which is part of leadership. There are more opportunities to teach students what's going on in the current climate in terms of politics, in terms of society, sociology, sociological principles are being dragged down into Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4. So there are, I think they're trying with the best of intentions. But the problem is that the real pressure, which ultimately is results. And thankfully, I've worked with a lot of head teachers who aren't results orientated. I've worked with some who are, and that's all they drive towards. And
Yeah.
and the students miss out incredibly from that. But
Okay.
working with head teachers that or leaders that weren't particularly results orientated, that understood that the other soft skills are vital, and that we've got to be developing those in our young people, or else
Yeah.
especially when young people aren't talking face to face as much as we did when we were kids.
Yeah.
You know, they're talking on devices. I saw something the other day where they talked. It was really made me feel quite sad actually. Talking to some students, I think they were primary school students on a news report the other day, and it was about banning phones in schools. And I don't agree that we should be banning phones in schools. I think phones are a part of life now. They are, you know, they exist. All we've got to do is figure out the best. Yeah, we've got to figure out how to manage it rather than just ignore the problem and pretend it's not there. But there was a young man said, little boy, if I didn't have my phone, how could I talk to my friends? And I was like, oh my God. It's like, you know, we managed to survive and we managed to have friendships and build those meaningful relationships without this. So therefore, who's telling these young people that without a phone, you won't have friends? Without a phone, you won't be able to communicate with people.
Yeah.
And that's really sad and that's really concerning.
Off the back of that, though, that also, let's bring it back into the corporate world, because now we do have phones. It means that you've pretty much got 24/7 carte blanche from a manager or leader to speak to their teams whenever they want to. And that then raises the question, actually, do we need phones? Should we be using phones? And I know that there's companies out in France, and there's a couple of companies I've worked with as well, who ban any emails or phone calls from employers, from managers, from leaders, whoever, before 8 o'clock in the morning and after 5 o'clock in the evening. And weekends, they're just not allowed to contact anyone. And they have such a fantastic culture because everyone works within the 9 to 5 or 8 to 5. And they make it work. How we used to do it back in the 80s or the 90s, we were able to make it work and we'd be able to have those. But now we're at that point where you're expected to be present 24/7.
I think that's actually a problem within, particularly in leadership teams, that culture of you must be available 24/7 exists among leadership. And
that's right.
I think that's potentially bad leadership when you're not allowing your leadership team to switch off at any point, that you've got to be available.
That's when
I do like the culture.
That's where the culture actually then builds up, because behavior breeds behavior. And if your C-suite is doing it, then the next suite is going to be doing it, and then the worker is going to be doing it, because it's the expectation. But
exactly,
it's where the leader at the start needs to say, set the boundaries, set the rules, that it's not about what we do, it's about how we want you to work. And we don't want you to work in the same way as we are. We have different responsibilities to you. And therefore, so there's some sort of conversation that needs to happen at that point there. Charlie, final question for today. And that's about conversations, honest conversations. What's an honest conversation that you've been avoiding with yourself?
I suppose, I think, you know, you're thinking, is this for me? Is the corporate world for me? Is this, you know, where I very much do my sessions with one foot in education. I approach a lot of what I do in my training from a very educational standpoint. I use a lot of the tricks and little things that I've learned as a teacher to bring that training across. That, ironically, that has proved to be quite successful, because people seem to like that. There's a kind of sense of, oh, this reminds me of being in school. This is quite nice. I'm quite enjoying this. It doesn't feel as full on as in corporate as corporate as other training sessions are. But you know, the corporate world is a tough world. It's a high stakes environment. People work at pace. They work in a very different way. I'm not saying that teachers don't. Teachers work at pace as well, but it's a kind of different dynamic. It's whether this is something I'm cut out for. But that's all to do with the background in the performing arts as well. I think that you don't tend to get that kind of, dare I say, cutthroat environment in the performing arts. There's a much more of a sort of cultured approach. That's not to say someone people can't be ruthless. They can, but there's much more of a, if you're in a play, you know, we've all got to be pulling in the right direction, or else the whole play falls apart.
So where's this taking you? Are you having this conversation with yourself about whether to stay in corporate or go back into education?
Actually, no. I think the is to stay in corporate or go back into the creative arts, so go back into performing again. I think
Okay.
that's where I'd go. My heart very much. I have a big soft spot for education and for being a teacher. I think I was good at it, and that's why I still enjoy doing the occasional bit of supply teaching. It keeps my hand in. It keeps me sort of connected with that world. And I'm still interested in that world. I'm interested in education, but I think if this didn't work out, it would be the performing arts. That's what I'd go back to.
So are we going to see you doing a Greg Davis or a Ramesh Ranganathan and doing some sort of quiz show on TV?
Who knows? I mean, who knows? It could
No
happen.
worries. Thank you so much for your time today, Charlie. You've given us a better idea and understanding of who you are around education. And I think that's really important because I think, the education part, the teacher part, you're very passionate about it. And it's nice to know the things that you can or are doing with Present with Presence as well. But for anyone that would like to contact you for more information about how you could help them or their organizations, how could they do that?
My website, presentwithpresence.co.uk, is there, and there's contact details on that, and all my Instagram and my TikTok and Facebook details are all there as well. Present with Presence is also on Google, and you can find it there. So, and if you just Google Present with Presence, I tend to come up top. So that's what to look at.
Fantastic. I'll make sure that everyone can see all that information on the description. And if people listening on the podcast, it will be in the description. But as for today's Becoming the Leader in You podcast, thank you so much for watching or listening. And please don't forget to like, share, subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. So keep growing, keep leading, but most importantly, become the leader in you. I've been Jay Acharya, and my guest today was Charlie-Ross MacKenzie. Thank you.